You didn't lose your job because you failed. You lost it because the work stopped needing your judgment. At the beginning, the job was unstable. Things broke often enough that someone had to be paying attention. Processes were manual, knowledge lived in people's heads, and small decisions mattered more than they seemed. Your value was obvious because the system could not function without you noticing what others missed. So you improved it. You simplified the workflow, removed unnecessary steps, and documented the parts of the job that used to rely on memory and intuition. You automated what could be automated, standardized what could be standardized, and reduced friction wherever it appeared. This is what competence is supposed to look like. For a while, it worked in your favor. The output became consistent. Errors disappeared. Questions slowed down. The system ran smoothly enough that it stopped demanding attention. That is usually the moment people expect reward to follow. More trust, more leverage, more security. Instead, something else happened. Quietly, the job began to change shape. Your name came up less often. The work stopped being associated with a person and started being described as a process. What you built no longer needed explanation because it simply ran. There was no meeting about it, no announcement, no clear turning point, just a subtle shift in how the work was understood. Most people believe efficiency makes them harder to replace, that doing the work better protects them, that value accumulates the longer you prove yourself reliable. But modern work systems don't reward effort. They reward outcomes. And once an outcome becomes stable, the system stops caring how it is achieved. What mattered wasn't who built the process, only that the process worked. The value moved away from contribution and toward cost. Not because your work stopped mattering, but because it stopped requiring judgment. The work didn't disappear. The role did. This is the part that feels personal, even though it isn't. From the system's perspective, a perfect process is one that runs without interruption. People are interruptions. They need context. They ask questions. They introduce variability. They cost money. A completed system doesn't need those things. So the more reliable the work becomes, the less visible the person behind it appears. Not because the person became less capable, but because capability was no longer the scarce input. What used to be valued as skill is absorbed into structure. What used to require attention becomes background. You didn't automate yourself out of the job by accident. You completed the task the system was incentivized to finish. This is why the removal feels confusing. You did everything right. The system agreed, and then it moved on. No one explains this when they ask you to optimize. No one talks about what happens after efficiency succeeds. Because the story we're taught is simple. Work hard. Improve things. Make yourself indispensable. But indispensability doesn't survive completion. Once the work no longer requires judgment, the system no longer needs attachment. What remains is something that runs quietly and predictably in the background. And anything that runs without friction eventually stops being noticed at all. The system didn't turn against you. It finished what it was designed to do. And once a system is finished, it doesn't look back at what made it possible.